Have you ever been obsessed with anything? I was, and it didn't do me any good. I was obsessed with exposing my wife as soon as possible. But I didn't notice the most obvious things that lay on the surface, and it seems to me, if I had noticed all this earlier, but I wouldn't have been worried about such serious consequences.
After another grueling workday, I returned home hoping for a peaceful evening in the company of my wife, Emily. The streets were awash with evening lights as I drove through the last few blocks, anticipating a warm smile and candle-lit dinner, a small yet significant ritual we occasionally indulged in, reminiscent of our early dates. Stepping into the house, I caught whiffs of Emily's favorite scent, mingling with the aroma of freshly cooked dinner. This evening seemed to hold nothing out of the ordinary. We sat down at the table, exchanged news of the day, sharing minor joys and disappointments. Her voice sounded as melodious as ever, her gaze filled with warmth and care. As the evening progressed, we moved to the living room to enjoy a cup of tea and watch a new series, which had become our little obsession. Emotions flickered on the screen, but I noticed Emily's gaze drifting, her thoughts wandering elsewhere. A vague unease crept over me, but I brushed it off, thinking it might just be fatigue from the day's work. That night, light conversation and laughter were filled with the familiar coziness of our home. I cherished these moments of tranquility and closeness, an worry that soon our mundane existence would be called into question. At that moment, I simply rejoiced in the peaceful evening spent together, oblivious to how soon everything would change. As the evening turned into night, our conversation became more intimate and profound. Emily suddenly grew silent, and in her eyes, I saw a shade of seriousness that rarely appeared without a significant reason. It became clear to me that she wanted to share something important that she had been holding on to for a long time. My initial thought was to support her, as in our relationship, we always aimed to be open and honest with each other. "Michael," she began, and I felt my heart skip a beat in anticipation. "I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and have come to the conclusion that I can't keep hiding it anymore." She said this, and I understood that the conversation was going to be very serious, as such words often precede something unpleasant. "Yes, dear. I'm listening attentively," I said. "Just don't think it's about you," she began after a brief pause. "I want to explore myself more, but because of our marriage, I can't do that. You understand?" "I don't understand. What do you mean?" I asked, genuinely not comprehending what she was implying. "I want something new, you understand?" she attempted to hint. "Do you want to spice up our sex life?" I asked. "No. I want to try something new with another man," she said directly. And I was stunned, not knowing how to react to such a revelation. It was unexpected for me, especially considering we had been together for 6 years. My emotions quickly shifted. I became more serious and asked with the same expression on my face, "You want to have sex with another man?" I asked this very harshly. I saw Emily beginning to hesitate, her eyes darting from side to side. "No," she blurted out. "I was joking, honey. It was just a prank." I completely didn't get her joke, and I really couldn't understand what had just happened, so I decided to ask a clarifying question. "Honestly, do you have someone else besides me?" "No. Where would you get such an idea?" she asked. "Then what was the point of this whole conversation?" I asked, my nerves on edge. I absolutely didn't understand what to do and say. It all seemed strange to me. Emily got up from the couch and headed to the bathroom, leaving me alone. A couple of minutes later, Emily appeared in front of me in a robe. She approached me and whispered directly into my ear, "Darling, I'm not wearing any panties." And at that moment, I understood what was going on. Emily deliberately wanted to upset me to later engage in passionate intimacy. At least that's what I thought, so I relaxed, lifted her up, and we did it first on the kitchen table, then finished our evening in the bedroom, and after that, we didn't return to this strange conversation. After our conversation that evening, A couple of weeks passed. With each passing day, my anxiety only intensified. I began to notice subtle changes in Emily's behavior that previously seemed insignificant to me. Now, every call she hurried to take in another room, every tardiness from work became reasons for suspicion for me. I used to trust my wife, but now I felt like she was hiding something. I decided to talk to her about it, hoping that an honest conversation would help dispel my doubts or, at the very least, understand what was really going on. "Emily," I began one evening as we sat in the living room, "I feel like something has changed between us. You seem distracted. Is there something you would like to tell me?" She looked at me with bewilderment, then replied with a slight smile, "Michael, I'm just tired from work. Don't worry so much, everything is fine." But my doubts didn't disappear. I began to pay attention to details, unexpected delays after work, new habits that seemed strange to me, such as her taking more frequent showers when she returned home late, or going to the bathroom with her phone, which she didn't do before. All of this made me contemplate starting to monitor her movements. I didn't see the point in hiring a private detective because I thought I could handle it myself. I began to note the times she left and returned home, checked her social media messages, sometimes even tried subtly to find out who she had been with during the day or evening. There was nothing suspicious in her messages. She didn't give me any reason to worry. But strangely, this only fueled more anxiety, as that conversation with her echoed in my mind when she mentioned wanting something new. My doubts and uncertainty continued to grow with each passing day, and I decided it was time to act more decisively, if only for my own peace of mind. I began to monitor her movements more closely. One day, when she said she was staying late at work, I decided to check her words. Parking my car several blocks away from her office, I approached closer to see if she would come out, accompanied by someone else. Standing in the shadows, I felt like a character from a cheap detective novel, but the trembling in my heart reminded me that this was my reality, not fiction. After about an hour of waiting, I saw Emily coming out alone. My relief was short-lived, as a few minutes later a yellow Chevrolet Camaro pulled up to her, and a man much older than both Emily and me stepped out. They embraced, and my heart stopped. I couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language spoke volumes. Emily was touching this man's hands. Then they shared a passionate kiss. They laughed and got into the car. I remained standing in the darkness, trying to gather my thoughts, realizing that I had messed up by not capturing video or photo evidence. On the way home, I tried to figure out what to do next. Questions raced through my mind. Should I confront Emily now or gather more evidence? Can I trust her at all? And what does this mean for our future? I returned home, and about an hour and a half later, Emily returned, immediately heading for the shower. I realized it was pointless to talk to her right now, as I had no evidence. So I installed a tracking app on her phone, justifying my actions with a desire to protect our future. In the first few days, I barely noticed any changes, but over time, I started receiving notifications that confirmed my worst fears. Emily was spending time in places she hadn't told me about, and it seemed like she was trying to hide these meetings from me. One day, after such a notification, I decided to follow her. My fears were confirmed when I saw her meeting with the same man. They seemed happy and relaxed together, which was a blow to me. I recorded their meeting on video, feeling a mix of anger, betrayal, and shattered hopes. On the way home, I pondered what to do with this evidence. On one hand, I wanted to confront Emily and demand explanations. On the other hand, I was afraid of destroying what was left of our relationship. I hired a private detective to gather more evidence while trying to maintain my usual lifestyle and not arouse suspicion from Emily. I didn't want to be a cuckold, so I planned to give Emily a truly cruel surprise. The private detective worked for 3 weeks, and after that, He provided me with all the information about my wife's meetings with this suspicious man, who turned out to be Randy Campbell, an influential individual with his own business unrelated to my wife's work. It became a mystery to me when and under what circumstances Emily met this man. I realized that decisive action was necessary. Thanks to the private detective, I found out that Emily stays with her lover every Saturday at a 4-star hotel, and they spend a minimum of 2 hours there. I also knew their room number. They had room 305, a luxury suite. So on Thursday, I asked my close friend, whom I explained the whole situation to go to the same hotel and book room 305 for a day, paying him for it. Since each room in this hotel had its own key card, my friend accidentally lost it the next day, Friday, and paid a small fine for it, which of course I compensated him for. As a result, on Friday, I had the key card to room 305, the very room where my wife usually spent time with her lover. I slept poorly on Friday night, but surprisingly, the next day, I felt alert and fresh. Emily left for work as usual, but from early morning, a private detective whom I had asked to work that day was watching her. Since I had taken the day off in advance, closer to lunchtime, I went to the hotel. I planned to book room 304, but decided to inquire with the administrator about room 305 first. I was told that the room was booked for today, and I sincerely wanted to believe that my wife and her lover had reserved it. Towards evening, I received a message from Emily. "Dear, I'll be late today, so don't wait for me." I replied, "No problem," and also called my private detective, who informed me that my wife had left the building and gotten into a taxi, apparently heading towards the hotel. I was surprised that she was alone, but at that moment, I had already decided to act, so I left my room and entered room 305. On the table, I placed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, as well as a magnificent bouquet of flowers on the bed, and sat waiting. My hands and legs were shaking from the impending meeting, but I understood that it was necessary. Emily arrived at the hotel around 40 minutes later. She was still alone. I asked a private detective to keep an eye out, and as soon as he saw Randy Campbell, to inform me immediately. I heard Emily approaching the door and activating her keycard. The door clicked, and she entered inside, looking so beautiful and independent. "You know, I think I understand what you meant by studying yourself and why our marriage is getting in the way," I said, pausing. At that moment, Emily's phone slipped from her grasp. She clearly didn't expect to see me here, but I continued, "But I don't understand why you didn't tell me everything that was going on with you that night." Emily stood silently, seemingly paralyzed. She looked at me, and I could see her trembling. She was scared, which amused me even more. I approached her, picked up her phone, and put it in my pocket. "What are you doing here?" she blurted out. "Did you think you could cheat on me and I wouldn't notice?" I asked. "No, darling. What are you saying?" she said, suddenly coming to life. She wanted to approach me, but I stepped back. "I suggest we discuss everything. Sit down," I said, and she sat at the table. I opened a bottle of wine, and as I poured us a drink, I decided to inquire, "Can you tell me how many times you've had sex with Mr. Campbell here?" "I haven't had sex here," she quickly replied, but I silently sat on the opposite side and continued, "Did you enjoy having sex with him?" "Please stop," she said nervously, and at that moment, I took out my phone and turned on the audio sound, which captured Emily's moans and how she begged her lover not to stop. You tell me to stop, but you ask Mr. Campbell to continue," I said. "I don't understand what you want." She continued to resist, looking like a mouse trapped in a cage and not intending to give in. "I just can't understand. You came here alone, and soon your lover is supposed to arrive. If you came here alone and no one forced you, then it's your choice, isn't it?" I asked, and it was evident that Emily was struggling with the tension. "I cheated on you, but it doesn't mean anything. I'll stay with you," she said bluntly. "You'll stay with me? Why do you think we'll be together after this?" I asked. "Don't you love me?" she asked. "What does that have to do with anything? We're talking about something else entirely," I said, raising my voice. "If you love me, you'll forgive me," she said directly. I laughed right in front of her. It sounded so absurd that it was even funny. "You're arguing like a little child. We're adults, and I want to have a normal conversation with you. Understand where I went wrong? Or maybe you have some issues. Lately, we've been talking less because you were caught up in your love affairs, and I was busy keeping an eye on you," I said, and then I got a notification on my phone, but I ignored it and continued, "You're resisting now, and it's unclear what you're hoping for. I want to save our marriage and help you primarily, but you're forcing me to resort to manipulation. I want to understand everything that happened and why you cheated on me." "I didn't cheat on you," she said loudly. "Are you mocking me?" But then I noticed Emily's eyes. They weren't usual. They were red and clearly not from tiredness. I realized she was in an altered state. She was under the influence of prohibited substances. "I understand you don't love me, so I'm leaving." At that moment, I realized it was serious, and my wife's strange behavior wasn't just because she cheated on me, but she was also involved in something forbidden. She quickly headed for the door to leave the room, and at that moment, I followed her and began to hold her back. I grabbed her hand, and she used her free hand to scratch my face. Then I grabbed her with both hands, and we fell onto the bed together. At that moment, I realized how much I had lost her and how much I didn't know. At that moment, Randy entered the room with a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of wine. He saw me dominating Emily right on the bed, and I completely forgot that he was supposed to come. "Please help me, this man entered the room and started harassing me," Emily shouted, and I realized that at that moment, it was over for me. They would either kill me or severely injure me. I didn't recognize my wife, who wanted to set me up. I saw Randy skillfully and quickly throw the wine bottle in my direction, but I managed to dodge it and fell off the bed. Randy was a big and athletic man, unlike me, because I didn't go to the gym and didn't practice martial arts, but I knew one really cool move, although I never used it, so I thought today would be the right moment for it. "You've misunderstood everything. I'm her husband," I said to Randy, who was heading towards me, clearly not with friendly intentions. Randy stopped and looked at Emily. "Is that true?" he asked her. Emily was already in tears at that moment. She looked at me and confidently said, "No." I was shocked by such a statement, and now I looked like a man who barged into a hotel room and harassed someone else's girlfriend. I would probably have killed myself. I realized that the situation had gotten out of control and action was needed immediately. Randy came charging at me again, and when he was within arm's reach, I applied that same technique. I hit him as hard as I could right in the groin, clearly catching him off guard. I saw him blush and grab his little buddy with both hands, and literally within a couple of seconds, he was lying on the floor, motionless. At that moment, I realized I needed to get out of the hotel. Emily was crying, and when I tried to lead her out, she resisted. I'd had enough of this, so I had to shout at her, "If you don't come with me right now, I'll call the police, and we'll go for tests. You'll be giving your samples." As soon as she heard about giving samples, her expression quickly changed, and she obediently followed me out of the room. After the incident at the hotel, we went to the hospital first, where Emily had to give all her samples, and they found prohibited substances in her blood, so I had to leave her at the hospital, but before that, we talked. At that moment, she was lying under a drip and gradually coming to her senses. I began to ask her how she ended up in such a life, and it turned out that her lover Randy, at every meeting, gave her something to try, but he himself didn't try anything, and Emily got hooked on it. Emily told me that Randy is a shareholder in their company, and she met him a couple of months ago. He courted her for a long time, but she always refused until he let her try something new, and after that, something clicked in Emily's head, and she wanted to meet Randy every time to find herself in that state again. He gave her prohibited substances, and in return, she had to sleep with him. Such a revelation horrified me, and, frankly, I didn't believe her, as she had already deceived me. Instead, I decided to wait a couple of days and came back to her at the hospital to have a proper talk. She looked better already, and I saw how her eyes changed. I couldn't believe how I hadn't noticed all the changes that had happened to her before. I tried to expose her and didn't notice obvious things. Her eyes. I thought she was just tired from work. Her nervousness, irritability, all these were side effects of prohibited substances. All her inappropriate behavior in recent months is a result of all this. She got involved with a bad person who took advantage of her. It was terrible. I didn't know what to do in such a situation. After a couple of weeks, Emily repented and confessed that she did it on some animal instinct and didn't even realize the extent of her actions. She was still in the hospital undergoing rehabilitation. I wanted to file a police report against Randy to hold him accountable, but my lawyer said it was pointless. Do you think the police will believe more? A drug-addicted girl without direct evidence, or a successful and influential businessman? Argued the lawyer. And he was right. We had no evidence except for Emily and Randy's regular meetings, but that wouldn't play a role in court. The most I could do was accuse Emily of infidelity and divorce her. So I decided not to touch Randy, considering the fact that he didn't pursue me after the altercation at the hotel, during which he got hit in his golden eggs. A month later, Emily went home. She was still undergoing rehabilitation because her addiction was strong, but the doctors said she could be at home now. Emily stopped working and spent whole days at home. I didn't know whether to divorce her or not. On the one hand, this person betrayed me, but on the other hand, she was sick and in a difficult situation, so I decided not to rush things and waited for the right moment. But in the end, everything only got worse. Emily started drinking alcohol every day. One addiction replaced another. I realized that I couldn't handle her, so I had to inform her parents about what happened, and literally the next day, her father came to our house seeing his daughter, or rather, what used to resemble his daughter. Emily had lost a lot of weight due to treatment and practically didn't eat anything. Her father first yelled at her, and then at me, for not taking care of his daughter and exposing her to such danger. A month later, Emily and I divorced, and her father took her home, and I was left alone. I still blame myself for not noticing the most important thing. I wanted to catch my wife cheating and got fixated on gathering evidence rather than focusing on the most important thing. Maybe if I had been a little more stubborn that evening and had a frank conversation with her, none of this would have happened.
That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments about this story. It will be interesting for us to read it. Also, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss new, equally interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!